I request Professor Probal Chaudhuri to take your seat, please. Professor Sumitra Pulkar, please have your seat on the dais. And Professor Arvindranath Basu, can you please take your seat, sir? May I invite Professor Shivaji Chakraborty to give his welcome address, please.
Warm greetings on behalf of West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology to all the dignitaries, senior fellows, research scholars, faculties, and ladies and gentlemen, and also to all who are probably following this program through the YouTube channel of the WAST. So this is the first program that is being streamed live through the YouTube channel that WAST has established very recently. So this is a happy announcement that we are doing the first program live streaming. So of course we are learning, so we'll see how it goes, then we'll gradually improve. At the very outset, I extend a very hearty welcome to all who have spared your time to come over here and listen to this talk on a very renowned personality. And I'm not going to talk about that at all because we are all eagerly waiting for the speaker to talk about that. Similarly, typically it is the duty of the president of the WAST to say a few words about WAST, but today we have the privilege of having our former president, Professor Probal Chaudhuri, with us, and he will talk about the WAST and the activities of WAST. So I refrain myself from making comments on that. I would only like to say that there are quite a few younger people, research scholars present today. So for you, I would like to say that WAST has two categories. One is fellow and the other is associate. Now, I would like to see many of you first as associate of WAST through your outstanding works in the domain of science and technology, and then gradually, elevating yourself to the level of fellow, which is quite competitive. We have 13 sections, and I think Professor Majumdar may highlight all those parts. So depending on your specialization and your achievement through your scientific contribution and technological contribution, we'd like to see maybe in another decade that you will be part of WAST as a fellow. So once again, I don't want to prolong this session by giving a very, lengthy talk. We are waiting to hear about Professor C.R. Rao. Of course, it is very easy to Google somebody nowadays and, read about any personality. So that's not a big issue. But I know the speaker today, he is not going to do that. He is going to tell us many stories or many anecdotes about the life of this great statistician, which probably will not get through the Googling. So we are waiting to hear those anecdotes, the real life facts that were part and parcel of the entire journey of Professor C.R. Rao. So with this, once again, extending very hearty welcome to all of you.
Professor Shivaji Chakraborty to say a few words about WAST, and I'll sort of say two things. Number one, many of you have been associated with WASP, so I really don't need to describe WASP in its gory detail. Essentially, there are two sets of activities that WASP does. One is to recognize scientific talent and contributions in the form of associates and fellows of the West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology. They are in different domains of science. Currently, we recognize 13 domains of science, and we elect fellows to the academy and associates to the academy. That's kind of formal thing that we do. Aside from that, I think that the second part is what we should concentrate on, and we don't do as much, and the pandemic really didn't help proliferate those kinds of activities, which is really outreach and reaching out to the public, reaching out to the society, building scientific temper in society. And we do that, or we should do that in the form of more lectures, in the form of engaging with the public. But again, those activities are picking up after a lull of a few years, and we will do more of that. The second thing that we do is to hold public lectures on technical topics, not really an outreach, but more on technical topics. And our annual meeting comprises, again, a kind of public lecture which is popular. The one thing that Professor Chakraborty has done almost immediately after taking over, is to initiate this YouTube channel that really makes us, accessible to everybody. I would also request Professor Chakraborty to actually invite. There are many organizations in the city of Calcutta or elsewhere. We can invite them, and these kinds of meetings don't have to be confined to the fellowship and associateship of WASP. We can invite them and make these public lectures as well, so that more people can benefit, and also the hall will look full. So, having said this, essentially this is what we do. But we also want to impact on science policy in the state. That has really not been possible, primarily because of lack of recognition in some way by the state government of the West Bengal Academy of Science and West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology. When I was at the helm, I tried my very best, but that wasn't possible for various reasons beyond my understanding even. But I would request Professor Chakraborty to do that. And once we get a recognition by doesn't have to be a formal recognition, but in some ways a recognition that would enable us to go long ways. So I will stop here without eating into Professor Chaudhuri's time, and thank you very much once again for coming to this meeting. Thank you.
So we are all eagerly waiting to hear from Professor Chaudhuri. So I now request Professor Sumitra Prakash to come and introduce Professor Chaudhuri.
I thank you, Indranil, and organizers of this occasion. That in fact, I came to know about this occasion from the speaker himself. He sent me an email and the flyer, and then I talked to Professor Basu saying that I want to come with his car. So anyway, I've been asked to say a few words about the speaker. It so happens that he's my batchmate in ISI. So when we came to ISI many years, 1980. So we finished MStat in 85. Then he went abroad to UC Berkeley for his PhD. Then after finishing PhD, he joined Wisconsin Madison. He worked there for a little more than 2 years, and then joined ISI in 1990, I think. Since then, he has been in ISI, and Probal area of research is in many areas in statistics. So it is. I assume that this audience is not exclusively a statistician. So if I say that he worked in non-parametric regression, then quantile regression, data cloud, and so on, so that it will make a little more technically demanding. But besides his theoretical contributions, they're absolutely fantastic speaker. And today I am sure we are going to hear many from him about CRO. And another thing is that I hope that certain aspects of Professor Rao's contribution to statistics, which our association our with Sierra Rao goes back to specifically his book Linear Statistical Inference and Application, second edition, which appeared in 1973. When we were students in BSTAT program of ISI, we came across that book and we had to read it. And we discovered later that there are many, besides the linear inference part, there are many other things in that book. But some of you who have seen this Sierra's, about there in YouTube, there is this Sierra, Life of Sierra. You'll see that Ephraim, right in the beginning, Ephraim is talking about 5 statisticians, Rao, Cox, then I think Wald, and 5 persons, I forgot that, and other names. Tukey and the 5th name I can remember now. So he is saying that Dr. Ravi's, in a sense, attitude is more like a scientist, where he's a little more flexible. And in one of his articles, he's talking about using the expression like hard agent. When he becomes very mathematically driven, little less concerned about the actual application. So these are fine points, and I'm expecting that for a person like Probal is fantastic understanding and absolutely brilliant speaker. So we will get to hear from him about some things. Thank you very much.
So I think Professor Chaudhuri, you can come and you can have your seat. Thank you.
No, presentation.
Oh,
So, is everything in order? Can I start? Okay, first. Of course, I am very young, academically as well as age-wise. So it's a great honor to talk about somebody like C.R. Rao. Okay? And whether I'm a good speaker or not, I don't know. But it always makes me nervous when I talk about somebody like C.R. Rao, because I don't know whether I will do enough justice to his contribution. Because if I have given like 1 hour to speak on somebody like C.R. Rao, I will probably can touch on one drop in a big ocean. And whatever I do, I will feel that I am missing lot more than what I'm talking about. And what I would like to do, I would like to touch more on C.R. Rao as a person, as I have learned from different sources, as well as occasionally by talking to him. As Sumitra has already mentioned, our first introduction to C.R. Rao was through that book, Linear Statistical Inference, because when we were student at ISI, he was no longer there. We used to see him coming to ISI occasionally, and then it's like, I mean, he will be giving a talk, and he's like the star in the galaxy, and then other smaller stars will be around him, and we, the students in the undergraduate course, will be sitting in the back row looking at all these stars. So that was C.R. Rao for us when we were undergraduate student. Okay. But later on, as I grew up, I met him in different conferences and then talked to him. And of course, we learned about many things, because C.R. Rao's work is part of your undergraduate curriculum if you are a student in statistics. So you hear the name of C.R. Rao again and again through different courses in statistics. Okay. Now, it is sort of customary to begin such memorial oration with the
initial personal life of the person, and I will try to do that. And a large part of my presentation will be based on one autobiographical essay by C.R. Rao himself and some materials that I have collected from the net, and also some personal communication with him and at various points of time, and also what I have heard from my senior colleagues about Dr. Rao. In our institute, C.R. Rao is popularly and very lovingly called Dr. Rao. He is not called Professor Rao because in our institute there was only one person who is called Professor, that is Professor Mahalanobis. Okay, so Professor Mahalanobis and Dr. Rao. So to begin, C.R. Rao was born in 10th September 1920, about 102 years ago, in a small village called Huvina Hadagali. That is now in Karnataka, but at that time it was the part of Madras province under the British India. He was born in a family which was a very, in some sense, a middle class or a lower middle class family, because his father was just a police inspector. His name was C.D. Naidu, and so he had a very transferable job. And so C.R. Rao writes that when he was young, he traveled various places in India. And in fact, when he was of age 11 only, in 1931, his father retired, and at that time they settled in Visakhapatnam. So before that, he was moving around, and at the age of 11, they settled in Visakhapatnam. C.R. Rao described his father as something like this, that they will rarely see him except possibly late at night. But after his retirement, they could see him more and would spend time more with him. He spent a lot of time with his mother. His mother's name is Lakshmi Kantamma. According to C.R. Rao, he was a very strict disciplinarian woman. And C.R. Rao, as he writes, says that he was very afraid of going to school. And his parents had real difficulty sending him to school. And that went on for about a year or so. So whenever he will refuse to go to school, he will be punished by his mother. And sometimes the punishments were hard, as in standard Indian families. But he says that after 2 years or so, he managed to overcome that. Now, after his schooling, very interesting about C.R. Rao's personal interest that a lot of people probably don't know. C.R. Rao had, other than sitting activities which might be distractive. Typical story in Indian families. However, I continued to maintain my interest in cultural activities. And then he mentioned something which many of us probably don't know. I accepted the presidentship of Kuchipuri Dance Academy in Delhi during the year 1970. To 7 in Buffalo. Okay. So, bachelor's degree in 1940, and then something interesting happened. He stood first class fast in mathematics, and he wanted to continue his postgraduate studies and research in mathematics. For that, he needed a scholarship. But he was late in applying for that. But he thought, because he was the only applicant for that, and since he stood first class fast, he shouldn't have any problem in getting that. Okay. But Indian bureaucracy is not like that. So he was immediately refused because he has missed the deadline. Then he went to somebody higher up, to the vice chancellor, and there he was essentially scolded, saying that because you couldn't find anything else, you have come here, so we are not going to take you. So that was the situation he was facing. So that was negative side of his initial academic career. But he has mentioned about one person that whom he interacted with as an undergraduate student, and I think I should mention that because this person had tremendous influence on C.R. Rao's life, and C.R. Rao has quoted him at many places. So here is what he writes about him. We were fortunate in having a Cambridge-trained mathematician, a senior wrangler in Tripos, Vammi Ramaswamy, as the head of the mathematics department. His style of teaching was different from that of the others. Having found that his students were bright, he asked us to read in advance from textbooks the theorems he would cover in the next class. He would question the students on what they read and start discussing the importance of the theorems. So this person, Vamma Ramaswamy, had a tremendous influence at the initial stage of his career, forming his interest in mathematics. Anyway, after completing his undergraduate, he was sort of kind of stranded. He didn't know what to do because he was not getting a scholarship to continue his postgraduate studies. So he was applying for jobs at different places, and eventually he found that there was a job in the army. At that time, the Second World War started. It was 1940. And there was an advertisement for jobs in the military services. One of them was, in quotes he writes, wanted a mathematician for the Army Survey Unit, apply to the Geological Survey of India. So he had to come to Calcutta, the Geological Survey of India, to apply for this job. So he writes, I applied for this job and went to Calcutta for an interview. There was a test in the morning and an interview in the afternoon. At the end of the day, the selection list was put up. My name was not there. Perhaps I was considered too young for field work, being less than 20 years of age at that time. So even that didn't work out for him. So what is he going to do now? He was really depressed and desperate. But something interesting happened at that point of time. He was staying at a hotel where he met a person named Subramaniam. And I will now quote again from C.R. Rao's writing about this person, Subramaniam. Subramaniam said that he was already employed in Bombay and was sent to the Indian Statistical Institute for training in statistics. Then he writes, although I studied statistics as a special subject in my mathematics honors course, I did not quite understand what Subramaniam meant by training which was then located in a couple of rooms in the physics department of the Presidency College. Indian Statistical Institute, many of you statistics was a subject of the future and that there would be good jobs for those trained in statistics, I decided at once to join the Institute for Training in Statistics, whatever it involved. So this poor fellow was desperately looking for a job and finally thought that this might be his last chance. So he went back, he had to go back to Visakhapatnam because he didn't have anything in hand at that time. And from there he applied for job in Indian Statistical Institute as a trainee. And fortunately, somebody in Andhra University who knew Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis at that time wrote a good recommendation letter for him, which got him a position in Indian Statistical Institute. He writes, I received a letter from Professor Mahalanobis admitting me to the training school of the institute from 1st January 1941. So he came and joined that. And there was a training that was going on. And it is really interesting to hear from C.R. Rao about the nature of that training. It's quite interesting and hilarious. So he says that statistics was his last resort and he had to take that. And then he describes his training program in Indian Statistical Institute. The one-year training course in statistics at the ISI was somewhat disorganized. The quality of teaching was poor, but there are many scholars doing research work on their own. He mentions names of many stalwarts. Rajchandra Bose, K.R. Nair, K.S. Banerjee were working on combinatorial problems in the design of experiments. S.N. Roy, Somarendranath Rai in multivariate analysis, and few others in different areas of theoretical and applied statistics. I met all the scholars and tried to interact with them, but I could not meet the professor, as Professor Mahalanobis was referred to with awe and reverence by everyone. I had seen him coming in and going out of his office at odd times of the day. He had a tall and commanding figure. Everybody was alert and ready to be called in for a discussion when the professor was in. Then he writes something very interesting. The scholars maintain a diary soon after that. Some program in statistics, which was the first of its kind in India. And I'm not sure, it might be first of its kind probably in the entire world, certainly in the Asia. Okay. The professor was met, the honorary head of the new Department of Statistics, and the institute technicians were made part-time lecturers at the university to teach the course. Rajchandra Bose and Somarendranath Rai were the main professors. They gave courses on the design of experiments and statistical inference. There were others like Sadashiv Sengupta, Purnendu Bose, who covered other topics. So in 1941, Calcutta University started the master's program. It was a 2-year program, and he joined that. And that was the first batch. And according to his writing that comes later, he hasn't mentioned it here, there were 5 people there, and they all passed in that as the first batch. Now, once again, he has a description of how that teaching program was in his own style. He describes it like this. None of the teachers had any experience of teaching statistics. And further, they are as ignorant as the students in some areas of statistics. As there were no textbooks on statistics, the teachers had to learn by reading original papers and then teach. The courses given in the first 2 years benefited the faculty as well as the students. So that is his very honest description of first year of MSc program in statistics in Calcutta University. Now here I should mention something which a lot of people don't know. C.R. Rao actually chose to have a dissertation as in lieu of some courses in his final year of the master's program. And there he proved a very interesting result. It was a result originating in econometrics. It was like this, that if you have 3 independent random variables and then found certain linear combinations, when can you say they are independent? Some conditions have to be worked out, okay? And he worked out a complete solution of that. And that paper later on was published in Econometrica, okay? And there are some interesting stories that I have heard from some of his students who are very senior econometrician now. One person told me something like this, that when he was a student, he was applying abroad for some academic program in econometrics, and he was looking for a letter of recommendation, and he wanted a letter of recommendation from an econometrician. So he went and asked C.R. Rao that whom can he approach? Then C.R. Rao said, well, I can write a letter for you. Then he said, but no, you are a statistician, you are not an econometrician. Then C.R. Rao said, why don't you do one thing? Go to the library and look at that issue of Econometrica and look at those two papers, and then come back and tell me if I would qualify as an econometrician for you. Okay. So this is an anecdote I have heard from one of his students. Okay. So anyway, in 1943, 2 years after he joined the program, he passed the MA degree examination with the first class, securing the first rank and a high percentage of marks. And these also earned me a gold medal of the Calcutta University at that time. And he was among the first 5 to receive the MA degree in statistics from any Indian university. I do not know the names of all 5, but I know name of the person. Was Professor Harikinkar Nandi, who was the critical behind development of the statistics program in Calcutta University. So he was actually C.R. Rao's contemporary. Now comes an interesting story from C.R. Rao again. So after he finished, all 5 students who graduated, they were offered jobs by Mahalanobis at the institute. Now, C.R. Rao was offered a job in 1943 when the monthly salary was only ₹75. He was a bit unhappy. He thought his first class father got a gold medal. He should get little more than that. But then some people told him that, never ask professor for more. Because if you ask for more, it will make him angry. But if you don't ask for anything, he will give you more. So keep quiet, don't ask for more. Okay. So he followed that advice. So he writes, however, I accepted the job without asking for more and joined the ISI in December 1943. To my surprise, I found that my salary was increased to ₹150 within a month. Perhaps the professor meant it as a gift for accepting the earlier offer without asking for more. Simultaneously, there was an offer of a part-time lectureship at ₹100 per month from Calcutta University to teach the master level courses in statistics with a handsome income of ₹250. So 250, so altogether it comes to 250 and 150, so 400, and then this extra 100, so 500 rupees. I decided, so C.R. Rao writes, I decided to settle down to work at the ISI in Calcutta. So it cost us 500 rupees at that time to get C.R. Rao in Calcutta. Okay. So that's, after that, what has happened is history. Okay. But the cost was only 500 rupees in 1943. So anyway, I think that is his initial career. I don't see any clock or watch here. So can somebody tell me how am I doing in terms of time? Okay, so like how much time I have spent already?
30 minutes.
Around 30. Minutes. Good. Younger people who are trainees. And he started teaching immediately from 1943. And as he was teaching, some of his great discoveries, those are made during that period. In fact, I was telling this to some of my friends in the morning that whenever you read any citation of C.R. Rao after he gets an word, you hear only three things: Rao-Blackwell, Cramer-Rao, and information geometry. The technical experts know, but we don't hear about them in the media or in the net so much. Okay, so whenever we hear about his prime contribution, it's Rao-Blackwell, Cramer-Rao, and then later on information inequality and information geometry. Okay, so how did that happen as he was teaching? Now, his first discovery was this Cramer-Rao lower bound, and at the risk of making it a little technical, I will say, essentially it's an inequality that follows from the elementary inequality called the Cauchy-Schwarz inequality. So you use Cauchy-Schwarz to prove this result. Now, Fisher actually proved such a result in large sample for maximum likelihood estimate. So a student, his name was V.M. Gandekar, in C.R. Rao's class, who was one of the bright students in the class, and according to C.R. Rao, who later became the director of the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics and distinguished himself as an economist, he asked C.R. Rao that, is this result true only in large sample or it's true in any finite sample situation? And according to the story and the anecdotes from different sources, C.R. Rao thought about it for some time. Some people say that he got it in one night. It may be a little longer. That's not important. C.R. Rao actually proves the finite sample version of that, which today is known as Cramer-Rao inequality, because Harold Cramer independently discovered that inequality. And as he was working on this problem, so this is an inequality that gives a bound on the performance of any unbiased estimate for a parameter. So it's like an uncertainty bound, that no matter how good your estimate is, it can never be better than that bound. That bound is sort of the best that you can do. That is the information bound. And as he was working on that, he discovered another result, which now is known as the Rao-Blackwell theorem, which says something like this, that suppose I have an estimate. Now, is it possible to improve that? Well, it's possible to improve by a very ingenious trick called Rao-Blackwellization. What you do there is, you have something called, which is a technical concept, a sufficient statistic, and you condition the original estimate on the sufficient statistic, and that conditional expectation gives you a new estimate, and that's a better estimate. So that is what is called Rao-Blackwellization. Again, C.R. Rao's name as well as Blackwell's name is associated with that, because Blackwell proved it independently shortly after C.R. Rao observed this. Now, I want to spend a few minutes on these two results, because these are sort of considered by everybody, and rightly so, most fundamental contributions of C.R. Rao, because these are like household terms in for any student who is doing undergraduate in statistics or postgraduate in statistics. Okay, so nobody cites these results with year or reference of the paper anymore. Okay, so it's a citation at a different level. Like we talk about Newton's laws of motion, and we don't cite the year or paper anymore. Okay, so it's at that level now. Okay, so Sierra actually talks about it at various places, and I have picked up certain interesting stories about it that C.R. Rao has mentioned. One interesting story that he has mentioned is that this Cramer-Rao lower bound became very popular very quickly, because it had many applications. Just like uncertainty principle had many applications in statistics, this Cramer-Rao lower bound is kind of like an uncertainty bound. And this uncertainty bound is sort of fundamental in proving many results in mathematical statistics. And as it was being used, something very funny happened. C.R. Rao writes this at one place. C.R. Rao says that once he was visiting Iran, and when he arrived Tehran, his luggage didn't arrive. So he went to the airline desk and they said, okay, Dr. Rao, you please go to your hotel. We will locate your luggage and send it to your hotel. Now, in the following morning, he gets a call. Then C.R. Rao realized that and some of his colleagues at Indian Statistical Institute, like R.R. Bahadur and those people, they were interested in knowing, is there a converse to Rao Blackwell? What is meant by converse to Rao Blackwell? It's like, if I know that if I have a sufficient statistic, how to improve an estimate by conditioning on it. Now, if for a problem, there is a best unbiased estimate or a minimum variance unbiased estimate, is it guaranteed that there is a sufficient statistics and is a function of that? First of all, sufficient statistics do not always exist. So is it guaranteed that in that situation, we can get a sufficient statistic and the function that I'm getting as the best estimate is a function of that? It's a very challenging and very interesting problem. And in fact, it was proved first by somebody. The proof was not correct. The correct proof was given by R.R. Bahadur, which is again another stalwart in mathematical statistics. He proved that it is true that if you have, under certain condition, if you have a best unbiased estimate, then the family of distribution that you are dealing with, they are called Darmois-Koopman type distribution, which always admits some sufficient statistic, and it will be a function of sufficient statistic. It's an extremely deep result, which many people don't know about. Okay. Finally, coming to third thing, which has become probably now very, very well known and probably is now superseding Rao's contribution in Rao Blackwell and Kramer Rao, the information geometry. In fact, the idea of information geometry was briefly mentioned by C.R. Rao in his original paper in 1945, but that was kind of very elementary. C.R. Rao realized that the information matrix that he was getting is a positive definite matrix and it can lead to some distance. But something more is true. In fact, you can create what are called Riemannian manifolds, and all probability distributions can be viewed as points on that Riemannian manifold. And if you calculate the geodesic distance there, that geodesic distance has a fantastic connection with the metric that is arising out of the information matrix. And it so happens that under some very simple situation, this Riemannian metric will reduce to nothing but the Mahalanobis distance of the Hellinger distance, depending on the situation. But in other situation, it has a very complex form. Now, this is one of the very hot area of research, which I myself am not very familiar with. I started learning it recently. And just to give you an information, it has become such a big area of research now, information geometry, that 6 years ago, Springer launched a journal on information geometry. And it's all has its root in C.R. Rao's work on Kramer Rao lower bound. Okay. Let's see. So anyway, C.R. Rao continued his work as a teacher and a data analyst in Indian Statistical Institute. Then something interesting happened in 1946. Professor Mahalanobis received a request from Cambridge Anthropological Museum to send two statisticians for doing some analysis of anthropological materials that they collected in Cambridge Anthropological Museum through archaeological excavation using Mahalanobis distance. And Mahalanobis decided to send C.R. Rao and another person named R.K. Mukherjee for that purpose. And that journey to Cambridge, C.R. Rao describes like this. Trevor agreed to employ both of us at the Anthropological Museum of the Cambridge University on a stipend of £20 a month. Mukherjee and I sailed to England in August 1946. Remember, this is the time when the Great War, the Second Great War, is sort of subsiding. So I sailed for England in August 1946 by the steamship named Andes, which was taking Italian prisoners for war from Bombay to Naples. During the war, Italian soldiers captured in Africa were detained in India. There was limited accommodation for civilian passengers on the ship. The Italian soldiers got off at Naples. We reached London by the end of August after being on the sea for 14 days. So C.R. Rao now reaches England, and shortly after that, he goes to Cambridge. Before that, he had met, and C.R. Rao's intent was to do PhD under him. So C.R. Rao went to meet with a request to him to be his PhD supervisor. This is what happened. For my PhD thesis, I wanted a theoretical topic. I asked Professor Fisher to suggest some problem on which I could work. He said, "Problem must be yours, and I shall help if I can." Now just imagine if you say this to your students now, what will happen? Anyway, at that time, most of Fisher's students were working on genetics, and he was the only person who was doing statistics. And he wrote his PhD thesis on classification problem. You know, Fisher developed the linear classification rule when he was analyzing this famous Fisher's iris data. But that classification rule that Fisher developed, it sort of came from their geometric intuition, but they never could prove or show that in some sense that has certain optimality. Optimality in the sense that if you look at misclassification of that classification procedure, the misclassification rate will be lowest. And C.R. Rao's PhD thesis was actually to show that. So this is another work of C.R. Rao, which we learned when we learned multivariate statistics in our postgraduate course. But this is something that is usually not so advertised. And this is, in my opinion, probably lies at the foundation of what we call today machine learning or artificial intelligence. So C.R. Rao proved that Fisher's classic linear discriminant function under Gaussian model has the best classification performance under certain conditions, of course, and the best classification has to be defined in a certain way. But in a way, the performance evaluation of classifiers and how to decide which classifier is the best classifier, which is basic in machine learning and artificial intelligence, that again comes from C.R. Rao's work. Now, as so this was C.R. Rao's PhD thesis, which he did in 2 years, and he completed the study in 1948. And C.R. Rao actually has a nice description about his days as a PhD student. So C.R. Rao originally went there to work at the Anthropological Museum on anthropological materials. And then he was working with Fisher on this classification problem. And Fisher also wanted him to learn some genetics. So Fisher wanted him to work with his animals like mice and etc. So at one place, C.R. Rao wrote something like this: I kept myself busy in Cambridge, dividing my time between bones and stones at the University Anthropological Museum and mice at Whittingham Lodge, the official residence of the Belford Professor of Genetics, converted into a genetic laboratory. So Belford Professor was, of course, Fisher, and the bones and stones referred to what archaeological excavation recovered in the Cambridge Anthropological Museum. So I will not go into any further details on that, and maybe I can now say one small anecdote that Fisher mentioned, not sorry, that C.R. Rao mentioned, and this is kind of very striking. Many of you will probably not know that. So many of you will probably know the name of Wishart, who is responsible for that Wishart distribution. So C.R. Rao writes this: J. Wishart was working in the School of Agriculture, which was next door to the museum, and I had the opportunity to meet him frequently and discuss statistical problems. I remember one occasion when he told me that Professor Harold Hotelling, who was at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill at that time, was thinking of offering me a position at the University of North Carolina, and wrote to Wishart to check up on my skin color, as there was difficulty in hiring dark-colored persons at the University of North Carolina at that time. Well, it's good that it was there. We did not lose him to North Carolina at that time. In 1948, he returned to India, and at the age of 28, when he returned to India, he was made a professor. Originally, he was thinking that he will probably be given. By that time, Indian Statistical Institute had this classification of professor, associate professor, etc. So originally, he was thinking that he will be given only an associate professor position. But unfortunately, Somarendranath Rai and R.C. Bose, they both went to North Carolina, University of North, architect of the program that it was developing. And when 1972, when of the institute, now I think our is institute has a very, he was also called the director, but the director was appointed of Indian Statistical Institute was Calyampudi, who became the director in 1976. And at that time, C.R. Rao was 56 years old. He was getting close to his retirement from India, and he chose to remain there as Jawaharlal Nehru Professor. That professorship was given to him by the government of India, and he continued with that. And then in 1979, he moved to University of Pittsburgh and continued there for nearly 9 years. And in 1984, actually, he took formal retirement from ISI, and he abandoned all his positions, including the Jawaharlal Nehru Professorship. And then after 9 years, he moved to Penn State in 1988, and till his death, he was there. And when he moved to Penn State, he moved there as the Eberly professor. Now, if I now tell you about various honors and recognitions C.R. Rao has taken, that list will be too long. And I don't think I want to do that. I'll tell you something that I have learned by something that Einstein said about any great scientist. If any of you have seen the movie Oppenheimer, Einstein has said that there too. So at one place, Oppenheimer, you see Oppenheimer is meeting Einstein, and Einstein was talking to him, and suddenly Einstein says that, you know, if you get a prize, always remember, it's for them, not for you. And if I'm honoring C.R. Rao today, I'm honoring C.R. Rao, not the prize givers. And C.R. Rao has won many awards. He was given Padma Vibhushan, who is the second highest honor given by the government of India. He was awarded the National Medal of Science by the US government, and he was elected to all the science academies in India as well as the Science Academy in the US. And above all, I think C.R. Rao is a person, if you give him prize or award, you honor the prize. You don't honor C.R. Rao. Okay, because C.R. Rao doesn't need any prize. Okay. I will end by saying something about his work that, again, many of us do not know about. In 1963, he wrote a fantastic article with Varadarajan, which is on this. Again, I will say, take a few minutes. How much time do I have? Am I overstretching already? Okay, fine. Okay, so in 1963, he was working on lots of anthropometric data that was collected from different regions in India. And he was working with Varadarajan at that time, and they were interested in this fascinating problem, how to do classification when your data is very, very high dimensional in nature. Prior to that, there was a similar problem he was working on in 1954 that was related to the effect of nuclear explosion that took place in Japan. And people were interested in knowing what will be the long-term effect of that nuclear explosion, and they had a lot of data, and there are a lot of linear models and linear equations going around there. C.R. Rao realized when he was handling those two problems, the first problem related to the nuclear explosion in Japan, that led to a problem where you have a linear model problem, but your information matrix or the X transpose X matrix is not invertible. And that actually was the genesis of discovery of generalized inverse. You know, at one point, that used to be one of the prime areas of research in Indian Statistical Institute due to S.K. Mitra and C.R. Rao and several others. And the second problem is related to anthropometric studies involving lots and lots of anthropometric variables. Now, let me now tell you about the 1963 paper of Varadarajan and reinventing this result. This 1963 result, a lot of people do not know. As I said right at the beginning, when we talk about C.R. Rao's contributions, that's essentially his first three contributions that he did in 1945, and we have remembered that a lot. But what he has done afterwards, those are known among localized experts. We don't know much of it in general, okay? Because it doesn't come in the media, it doesn't come. Okay. So anyway, so that was the result of Rao and Varadarajan, that in infinite dimension, Gaussian measures behave in a completely different way. And when they're mutually absolutely continuous, then Mahalanobis distance can be connected to Hellinger distance and such things. That is the 1963 paper. Okay. So anyway, I think I will stop here by saying briefly what C.R. Rao wrote at the end of this biographical essay, which he wrote when he was 70 years old, so 30 years ago. So he writes this. So in retrospect, that is the heading. Statistics as a last resort has brought some success in my life. I still think of what my career would have been if the principal and vice chancellor of the Andhra University had accepted me as a research scholar in mathematics, or if I had been successful at the interview for a military job. As I look back on the last 5 decades of my activities, I find several missed opportunities and unfinished tasks. The words of Robert Frost comes to my mind. I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Thank you very much.
So naturally, a very heartwarming and fantastic talk, and we came to know many things about C.R. Rao's life and works. I don't know whether I should ask that question, but I think any comment or any other thing that might be relevant to this, please, you can speak out. So anyone wants to make any comment or any memories with C.R. Rao, you can.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What happened after he migrated to US?
I didn't have time much to tell about it. So he spent about 9 years. He was taken to University of Pittsburgh by the initiative of his friend P.R. Krishnaiah. They had a multivariate center there, and he was working there. And he had several students, and he has proved lots of fundamental results in multivariate analysis during that period, and also in many other areas. Then after P.R. Krishnaiah's death, things were not working out very well for him at Pittsburgh. So he moved to Penn State as Eberly professor, and there again he continued with his research. And during that period, he became interested in applications of statistics in genetics and biology, and he did a lot of work in that area. And so, I mean, it just continued like the way he was doing many things. There isn't anything specific that comes in my mind at this moment. Patsada, do you know anything specific?
Right. I mean, he did this sense of genetic diversity, the whole series of papers. So that's about right.
So he became interested in that, and he was doing that. At one place, he says something very interesting. So when he was growing old in Penn State, one day he was thinking, he writes that, what shall I do if I take retirement tomorrow? And I was asking my wife about that, and his wife was telling him something. And then something very interesting happened. The next day, the dean of the university walked into his office saying that,
I mean,
So, and I think the development of our undergraduate program after I mean, it's like somebody like C.R. Rao had done enough here, and then he was just wanted to move forward like that. That's how I would say. Whether there was an unhappiness or bitterness, I don't know. Okay, there might be, but that's not important. The way I look at it is, somebody like C.R. Rao cannot stay at one place forever. Okay, he has to grow and he has to fly.
And his children were already settled in the US.
Yeah, that is also another reason.
Daughter, both of them were settled in the US. So, Probal, I want to say something that, again, I mean, I get the microphone.
Sure.
Just this you may not know, and so I wanted to share this with you in particular. So you mentioned about. All right. So I really didn't want to share stage with you, but this is something quite interesting that I had heard from Dr. Rao himself. So Probal mentioned the name of V.M. Dandekar, and Dr. Rao once showed me a photo, and he said that of all the awards that he had gotten, he was very proud of an award that he had gotten for a photograph, and he showed me the photograph. This was V.M. Dandekar lying, below a banyan tree. It was a black and white photograph that Dr. Rao had taken, and he had gotten an award for this photo. So Probal mentioned about his many interests, including photography, and also mentioned about
passion for him.
Yes, so that was very,
I
very
will add
interesting.
something to it that he has mentioned in this essay, that he was such a passionate photographer. He said that once I got a camera, first I wanted to do a lot of experiments with my wife. So I took a lot of her pictures, and then those pictures became very popular with families in our neighborhood. So they all wanted their young daughters to be photographed by me, so that could be sent to the prospective grooms. That's something he has mentioned in this autobiography.
I'm also tempted to say another thing. Yeah.
He's a very colorful character.
Very colorful character. Of course, I can mention a lot of things, but another thing that when I joined the Indian Statistical Institute on 3rd of August 1970 as a BStat student, Dr. Rao after about 2 years, even before he retired, went away to Delhi and spent several years in Delhi before his retirement. So when we had joined, he was still in ISI. And, there's a very famous room in ISI, in the main building of ISI, which is called Room 3.0. Our classes would be held in 3.0, which is on the 3rd floor of the main building of ISI. The location of that room is beside a corridor. And around 11 o'clock every morning, we would see, this person in chappals, in Hawaii chappals almost every day, walk towards the BT road. That corridor would lead towards the BT road, and we didn't know what was going on there. So every morning, and later we learned that, any research scholar in ISI, if they had a problem that they couldn't solve for some time, 11 o'clock was the tea time, and Dr. Rao would invariably be there in the tea room, which is at the end of that corridor near the BT road. And anybody who had any problem that wasn't he or she could not solve, they would wait there 5 minutes before Dr. Rao came, and Dr. Rao would, at the end of the tea session, probably they had the solution. So that was Dr. Rao every day.
Maybe I can add one more story to that now. So when we were students, one of our teacher told us something like this, that when C.R. Rao, S.K. Mitra and D. Basu, all three were there, it was like this. Every morning, C.R. Rao will make a conjecture. And if this is true, by the end of the day, S.K. Mitra will prove it. And if it is false, by the end of the day, D. Basu will give a counter example. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are almost at the end of our program. So may I ask Professor Anandranath Basu to give vote of thanks.
disappointment and to have such a poor attendance is really disheartening. Having said that, let me come to the thanks part. So I begin with thanking our sponsors, Tata Steel Limited, and the primary thanks of today's event must go to Professor Probal Chaudhuri, who has for a long time studied both the scientific contributions of Professor C.R. Rao and also studied his life very thoroughly. So he was certainly the best person today to give a lecture like this. I would like to thank the Academy. I'm part of that, of course, but the Academy as a whole took the initiative of having this memorial lecture on C.R. Rao. I thank the President of the Academy for taking personal initiative. I thank Professor Parthu Majumdar for adding a lot before the talk and after the talk. And finally, I thank all of you who are here today for making this a worthwhile event. And at the end, I point out that there are some snacks outside for us. And thank you all very much for being here. And if I may add that although nobody from the administration of Bose Institute is present here, this accommodation, this auditorium has been provided by the Bose Institute to the Academy for holding this lecture. So a very grateful thanks to them as well. Thank you all very much.